In the depths of Africa, surrounded by dense forests and green hills, lay the village of Talawo. This village was blessed with abundant resources and kind-hearted people who always lived in peace and harmony. In Talawo, where everyone knew their neighbor, harmony reigned. Each morning began with smiles and kind words, and the days were filled with work and joy. Here, time passed slowly, and the villagers cherished every moment. Whether working in the fields or sharing stories by the evening fire, Talawo was renowned for its fertile lands and abundant water. The wells and streams were always full, and rivers flowed through the entire village, bringing life to the plants and the people. The villagers cared for the land as their most precious gift, and in return, the land rewarded them with bountiful harvests. The village fields flourished and yielded rich fruits. Livestock were well fed, and the rivers teemed with fish. In Talawo, there was always enough food and water, and every resident knew they could rely on their neighbors' support. Among the villagers was a man named Jabari. He was known in the village as a hardworking and diligent farmer. From early morning until late evening, Jabari labored in his fields, cultivating the land and tending to his livestock. Despite his efforts, Jabari was a reserved man. He rarely interacted with his neighbors and preferred solitude. Unlike others, he did not enjoy noisy gatherings or celebrations. For him, happiness lay in work and discipline. Jabari lived on a hill where an old house, built by his grandfather, stood. The house was surrounded by green fields that yielded a rich harvest each year. Jabari took pride in his achievements, believing he had accomplished everything on his own. However, despite his dedication to work, he was a stranger to the joy that came from connecting with others. He often sat on the porch of his house, gazing into the distance and pondering ways to improve his farm. His thoughts were consumed with concerns about the land, the livestock, and the harvest. Jabari believed that every person should look after themselves and relied solely on his own strength. This isolation made him distant from the rest of the world. And while his neighbors respected him for his hard work, they rarely saw him at communal gatherings or celebrations. But one day, on one of those bright days when the sun shone over the village, everything changed. A drought came to Talawo, the likes of which hadn't been seen in many years. The sky, usually blue and cloudless, turned dull and gray. The clouds vanished, and the sun scorched the earth mercilessly. The days grew hotter, and the land, once green and fertile, began to crack and wither. The wells and rivers began to dry up. People watched anxiously as the water they had always relied on disappeared. The streams that once flowed through the village dried up, leaving only barren beds behind. Crops withered, and even the most hard-working farmers could not save their plants. Livestock suffered from thirst, and people were filled with fear for the future. Water, once abundant, had now become a scarcity. Talawo was on the brink of survival. All the wells and rivers in the village had dried up except one, the old spring on Jabari's land. When Jabari discovered that his spring still flowed, he first felt relief, then surprise. But soon, a thought arose in his heart. Why me? Jabari began to realize that his well was now the only source of water in the village. This awareness sparked a sense of pride within him. A new kind of pride began to take root in his heart. The pride of knowing that the fate of the entire village now depended on him. But instead of sharing this gift with his neighbors, as was customary in Talawo, Jabari started to think about how he could use this water for his own benefit. At first, Jabari told no one about his spring. He continued working in his fields, watching as his neighbors struggled to save the last remnants of their crops and their animals dying of thirst. He watered his plants at night so that no one would notice that his land remained green and flourishing. But soon, hiding it became impossible. Villagers noticed that Jabari's crops and livestock remained lush and alive, while everything around them withered. People began coming to him, asking for water. At first, Jabari didn't refuse anyone. He allowed his neighbors to fill their jugs and take the water home. Helping them made him feel good, and he felt needed. But with each passing day, a fire of greed grew stronger in his heart. Why should I share? Thought Jabari. Water is now my wealth. I can use it to my advantage. He began to feel his power over the village. Jabari saw people coming to him, pleading for water, and felt that he now held control over their lives. This sense of power was intoxicating. He began to contemplate how he could use this situation to enrich himself. Gradually, a conviction took root in his heart that he had the right to manage the water as he saw fit. Soon, Jabari decided he would no longer give water away for free. He began to charge each jug. At first, the fee was small, and although people were surprised to pay for something that had once been free, they agreed. But over time, Jabari demanded more and more. Those who couldn't pay were only allowed a few sips on the spot, but could not take any water with them. The villagers were in shock. Jabari, whom they had known as an honest and hardworking man, had turned into someone entirely different. His eyes now gleamed with greed, and his heart grew colder. He was no longer the man he once was. News that Jabari was charging for water quickly spread throughout the village. People were outraged, but they felt helpless. Everyone knew that without water, their families could perish. Soon, this news reached Jabari's brother, Amani. Amani was the opposite of Jabari. He was open-hearted, kind, and compassionate. All the villagers respected and loved him for his willingness to help anyone and support them in difficult times. Amani decided that he needed to talk to his brother and try to convince him to change his ways. Amani approached Jabari with good intentions. He hoped he could make his brother see that water was a gift meant for everyone, especially during such a challenging time. Jabari, you have to understand that we are all one family in this village, Amani said. Everyone needs water, and you cannot charge for it. Even the wise village elder couldn't persuade Jabari to do the right thing and share the water with others. Jabari's parents, seeing the change in their son, also tried to reason with him. His father reminded him that one cannot build wealth on the suffering of others. But Jabari remained unyielding. He told his father that the water was a gift from God, given to him, and he had the right to use it as he pleased. He added that although the fee was modest, his parents could take water for free. His father, a good-hearted man, replied, "If you believe your own brother should pay you for water, then I, too, will start paying you for it." The father hoped his statement would prompt Jabari to see reason, but Jabari gave no reply. Jabari reveled in his power, denying water to those he had lived alongside his entire life in the village. Disappointed and disheartened, Amani realized that his brother was no longer the man he once knew. This became a turning point in their relationship. Amani could not accept that the villagers should have to pay for water, so he decided to find a way to help them. Together with his friends, he resolved to dig a new well that would serve everyone. They gathered a group of men and began digging deep into the ground, hoping to find fresh water. The work was slow and grueling. The days grew hotter, but Amani and his friends did not give up. They labored day and night, unsure how deep the water might be, but they were filled with determination to reach it. Each morning, Amani and his friends gathered at the site and started digging. They knew it could take months, but they were prepared to go all the way. While they toiled, Jabari continued amassing his wealth. Jabari felt increasingly secure in his power. Soon, he decided he needed to protect his spring from any potential interference. He began constructing a large new house directly over his water source, so no one could steal even a drop. This house became a symbol of his newfound wealth and authority. The entire village watched the construction with confusion and concern. People couldn't understand why Jabari needed such a large and luxurious home when they were all suffering from the drought. But Jabari was filled with pride. He believed he was now the most influential person in the village. To him, this house would not only protect his water from others, but also shield him from any judgment his neighbors might hold. One day, among the people coming to his spring for water, Jabari noticed a young woman whose beauty set her apart from the others. Her name was Zara, the daughter of the village blacksmith. Zara was not only beautiful but also intelligent, attracting the attention of many young men in the village. She was engaged to a young man named Lemba, but Jabari, using his influence and wealth, decided that she should be his wife instead. He began pressuring Zara and her family, offering lavish gifts and promising them a life of abundance. Zara, knowing her family was struggling due to the drought, felt compelled to agree. Heartbroken, poor Lemba disappeared into the forest, and no one saw him again. Jabari was pleased with himself. He believed that now he had everything he wanted: wealth, power, and a beautiful wife. But soon, Jabari noticed that Zara did not look happy. Despite all the gifts and the luxurious life, she remained cold and distant. Jabari didn't understand what was wrong, but his heart, consumed by greed, kept him from reflecting on what truly mattered. He was too absorbed in his ambitions to realize that happiness couldn't be bought with wealth. 9 months after their wedding, Jabari and Zara had a son. Jabari was pleased and proud of his heir. He lavished Zara with expensive jewelry and the finest fabrics, hoping to make her happy. But despite all his efforts, Zara could never bring herself to love her husband. She no longer smiled as she had before their marriage and spent her days in silence. In the village, laughter and joy had disappeared. The people suffered from thirst and a lack of water, but Jabari didn't care. He relished his power and wealth, oblivious to the fact that people had begun to avoid him. Consumed by thoughts of money and power, he paid no attention to what was happening around him. A year and a half later, Amani and his friends finally struck water. When the village elder tasted the new water, he declared it to be the purest and most refreshing water he had ever tasted. The entire village began to celebrate their salvation. People sang, danced, and thanked each other for their shared efforts. But in Jabari's heart, a feeling of envy and despair began to grow. Consumed by rage, Jabari demanded that Zara leave their son with him and go. Then Zara revealed that the child was Lemba's, conceived out of spite the night before her wedding to Jabari. In his fury, Jabari struck her. That very night, Zara took her child and left, leaving Jabari completely alone. Now Jabari was utterly alone. His wealth, his home, and his power no longer brought him any joy. He sat in his vast, silent house and, for the first time in a long while, reflected on what he had done. He remembered how happy he had been when he simply worked on his land, helped others, and was part of village life. But his greed and thirst for power had led him to total ruin. Several days passed, and the water source on Jabari's land began to dry up. He knew that once it was gone, he would have to go to the communal well, and the thought filled him with dread. How would he be received by the people he had mistreated for so long? What would his brother Amani say, the brother he had betrayed? When his water finally dried up, Jabari gathered all his courage and set off toward the communal well. As he drew closer, he heard the cheerful voices of women, the laughter of children, and the conversations of men. The well had become a new gathering place in the village, where people met to chat and share the latest news. But as soon as the villagers noticed Jabari, all sounds ceased. People began turning to look at him, and Jabari felt his heart tighten with shame. Slowly, he approached the well, forcing himself to lift his gaze and meet the eyes of the villagers. But instead of anger, he saw pity in their eyes. They understood that Jabari had destroyed his own life through greed. They stepped aside, allowing him to pass. Jabari felt a deep sense of remorse wash over him. He approached the well, drew water, and realized that now this was all he had left. After drawing water, Jabari went to his father, weeping and begging for forgiveness. His father, seeing his son in such a state, said nothing. Instead, he led him to the village elder. The elder listened to Jabari and, understanding that he was genuinely repentant, offered him guidance. Return what you have taken from your people. Sell your wealth. Give the money to those who have suffered most from the drought. And begin living an honest life. Work, earn your bread through your own labor, and help those in need. Only then will you heal your soul and regain your honor. Jabari followed the elder's advice. He sold all his belongings, gave the money to those who had suffered most from the drought, and returned to the simple life of a farmer. Each day, he rose with the first light of dawn and worked his land, as he once did. After working his own fields, he would go to help his brother Amani, who, despite everything that had happened, found it in his heart to forgive him. Gradually, the villagers began to accept Jabari back into the community. They saw that he was truly repentant and was doing his best to make amends. Many years passed before Jabari was once again considered part of the village. He lived humbly, but with peace in his heart, having come to understand that true happiness lies not in wealth, but in kindness and mutual support. Jabari's story became a lesson for the entire village. It was passed down from generation to generation, reminding everyone that greed and selfishness lead to loneliness and suffering, while true happiness can only be found through kindness and caring for others. Once again, peace and harmony returned to Talawo, and the people learned to cherish the simple joys of life, understanding that true value lies in love and mutual aid.